The Queen of Rivermead, the strong leader of all. Queen Elena ruled the village of Rivermede with a firm hand and a kind heart. People called her the Iron Queen because she was tough and never backed down from a fight. Her village was home to people who had been kicked out of other places. They came to Rivermede looking for safety and a new start. Under Eleanor's rule, Rivermede grew rich. The farms produced more food than they needed. The mines gave them gold and silver. The village became known as a place where anyone could find help and protection. Elena was the daughter of Marina, a woman who could heal the sick with herbs and potions. Marina had special powers that let her see things others could not. She could tell when trouble was coming and when people were lying. Marina had taught Elena everything she knew about leading people and fighting battles. Years ago, Marina had lived in the kingdom of Westold. She had been the royal healer there, but jealous nobles had accused her of practicing dark magic. They said she had poisoned the old king. This was not true, but nobody believed Marina when she said she was innocent. The new king had her thrown out of Westhold and told her never to return. Marina and young Elena had wandered in the wilderness for months. They finally found the empty valley where Rivermede now stood. With Marina's wisdom and Elena's strength, they built a new home. Other outcasts and refugees joined them over the years. Elena remembered those hard times. She knew what it felt like to lose everything and start over. This made her a good leader for people who had nowhere else to go. The village had strong walls and well-trained guards. Elena made sure everyone learned how to fight. Even the children knew how to use a sword or bow. She told her people that they might have to defend their home someday. "We are not like other villages," Elena would say at the town meetings. "We take care of each other here. We protect what we have built together." The people of Rivermede loved their queen. She was fair when settling arguments. She made sure everyone had enough food and shelter. When raiders attacked nearby villages, she sent help and weapons. She never asked for anything in return. But Elena's success had not gone unnoticed. In the kingdoms around Rivermede, rulers were starting to worry about this growing village led by a woman. The greedy tyrant. Far to the east, in the dark castle of Ironhold, lived Duke Marcus. He was a cruel man who ruled through fear. His soldiers took whatever they wanted from the villages under his control. Anyone who complained disappeared in the night. Marcus had heard stories about Rivermede's wealth. Traders spoke of fields heavy with grain and mines full of precious metals. They talked about a village where even common people wore jewelry and ate meat every day. The Duke's hunger for more land and riches grew stronger each day. He studied maps of the region and questioned every merchant who had been to Rivermede. What he learned made him angry and jealous. "How dare a woman rule such wealth?" Marcus said to his generals. "She should bow to a real king like me. All that gold belongs in my treasury." Marcus decided to test Elena first. He sent messengers to Rivermede with a simple demand. Elena and her people must swear loyalty to him. They must send half their crops and metals to Ironhold every year. In return, he would let them keep living in their valley. The messengers arrived on a cold morning in early spring. Elena met them at the gates of Rivermede, surrounded by her guards. The lead messenger, a thin man with shifty eyes, read Duke Marcus's demands out loud. "My master, Duke Marcus of Ironhold, claims lordship over all lands within 50 miles of his castle," the man said. "This includes your village. You have 1 month to send tribute and pledge loyalty. If you refuse, the Duke will take what belongs to him by force." Elena listened without speaking. Her face showed no emotion. When the messenger finished, she was quiet for a long moment. The people of Rivermede who had gathered to watch held their breath. Finally, Elena spoke. Her voice was calm but cold as winter ice. "Go back to your master," she said. "Tell him that Elena of Rivermede answers to no one but her own people. We owe him nothing. If he wants what we have, he can come and try to take it." The messenger's face turned pale. "My lady, you should think carefully about this choice. The Duke has a large army. Many villages have tried to resist him. They all fell in the end." Elena stepped forward. The guards moved with her. The messenger took a step back. "I have thought carefully," Elena said. "Now you think carefully about how fast you can ride back to Ironhold." You have until sunset to leave my lands." The messengers left quickly. They knew better than to test the Iron Queen's patience. That evening, Elena called her war council together. These were her best fighters and wisest advisers. They met in the great hall of her wooden palace. "Marcus will come," Elena told them. "We all knew this day would arrive. Someone would eventually try to take what we have built." Thomas, her captain of guards, nodded grimly. "How many men does he have?" "The merchants say at least 3,000 soldiers," Elena replied. "Maybe more. He has been gathering an army for months." "We have only 800 fighters," said Sarah, the village's master archer. "The odds are not good." Elena looked around the table at her advisers. These people had been with her for years. They had helped build Rivermede from nothing. "Numbers are not everything," she said. "We know this land better than any outsider. We fight for our homes and families. They fight only for gold. That makes us stronger." The council began planning their defense. They would use the mountains and forests around Rivermede to their advantage. Small groups of fighters would harass Marcus's army as it marched toward the village. The main battle would be fought at the narrow pass that led into their valley. Elena sent messages to allied villages asking for help. Some sent a few fighters, others promised to share supplies. Most were too afraid of Marcus to do anything. The preparations took weeks. Every person in Rivermede had a job to do. Children and elderly people moved to hidden caves in the mountains. Fighters practiced with their weapons until their muscles ached. Engineers built traps and barriers along the roads. Elena worked harder than anyone. She was everywhere at once, encouraging her people and checking their defenses. She barely slept or ate. Marina had to remind her daughter to take care of herself. "You are no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion," Marina told Elena one night. "A leader must stay strong for her people." Elena knew her mother was right, but she could not shake the feeling that she was responsible for putting everyone in danger. If she had agreed to Marcus's demands, maybe her people would be safe. Marina seemed to read her daughter's thoughts. "You did the right thing," the older woman said. "Bullies like Marcus never stop with just one demand. First, he would want half our wealth. Then he would want all of it. Then he would want our freedom too." Elena nodded. She knew this was true. There could be no peace with men like Marcus. The only choice was to fight or surrender everything they had worked for. Word came that Marcus's army was on the march. Scouts reported seeing thousands of soldiers moving west toward Rivermede. They would arrive in less than a week. Love in a time of war. While Elena prepared for battle, trouble was brewing in the northern kingdom of Westold. This was the same place where Marina had once lived and been falsely accused of murder. King Robert of Westhold was old and sick. His heir was Prince David, a young man who tried to be good and fair. But David's younger brother, Prince Karl, was jealous and power-hungry. Karl wanted to be king instead of his older brother. The situation became more complicated when both princes fell in love with the same woman. Her name was Jessica, and she was the daughter of a poor farmer. She was beautiful and kind, but she had no money or noble title. King Robert did not approve of his son's choice. He wanted David to marry Lady Catherine, the daughter of an important duke. This marriage would make political alliances stronger and bring more land under royal control. "You are the future king," Robert told David. "You cannot marry for love alone. You must think of what is best for the kingdom." David respected his father, but he could not forget Jessica. He met with her in secret, promising that he would find a way for them to be together. Karl saw this as his chance to destroy his brother's reputation. He made his own plans to win Jessica's heart. Karl was more handsome than David and better with words. He showered Jessica with expensive gifts and spoke of the riches he could give her. Jessica was confused and frightened. She loved David, but she could see the problems their relationship caused. She also noticed how Karl looked at her with hungry eyes. There was something dangerous about the younger prince that made her uncomfortable. The situation exploded during the harvest festival. David had arranged to meet Jessica by the river outside town, but Karl had followed them. He confronted the couple and demanded that Jessica choose between the brothers. "Why settle for a man who must hide his love?" Karl asked Jessica. "I would make you my queen and show you off to the world." David was angry at his brother's interference. "Jessica has already made her choice," he said. "She chose me freely. You should respect that." Carl laughed coldly. "Did she? Or did she just choose the man who will be king? Maybe she would prefer the man who should be king." The argument turned into a fight. The two brothers wrestled by the riverbank, both trying to prove their strength. In the confusion, Jessica fell into the fast-moving water. The current was strong from recent rains. Jessica could not swim well. She called out for help as the river carried her downstream toward dangerous rocks. Both princes jumped in to save her. David was the better swimmer, but Carl was more desperate. In his panic to reach Jessica first, Carl accidentally pushed her under the water. By the time they pulled Jessica to shore, it was too late. She had drowned. David held her lifeless body and wept. Carl stared in shock, realizing what he had done. "This is your fault," David told his brother. "If you had not interfered, she would still be alive." Carl could not accept the guilt. He told everyone that David had pushed Jessica into the river during a jealous rage. Some people believed this story, others thought Carl was lying to protect himself. King Robert was furious with both his sons. He blamed their foolish fighting for Jessica's death. As punishment, he decided that David must marry Lady Catherine immediately. Carl would be sent away to lead the kingdom's army in a war against raiders from the south. David felt like his world had collapsed. The woman he loved was dead, and now he must marry someone he barely knew. But he was too consumed by grief to argue with his father. The royal wedding was a grand affair that lasted 3 days. David went through the ceremony like a man walking in his sleep. Lady Catherine was beautiful and intelligent, but David's heart was buried with Jessica. Unknown to everyone, Lady Catherine was not the innocent noble she appeared to be. She had her own secrets and ambitions. She had agreed to marry David only because she wanted to be queen someday. She cared nothing for David's happiness or the kingdom's welfare. Carl rode south with the army, but he was not really interested in fighting raiders. He was planning something much more dangerous. While everyone thought he was serving the kingdom, Carl was actually making secret deals with King Robert's enemies. Carl had convinced himself that he would be a better king than David. He began plotting to overthrow his father and brother. He promised neighboring kingdoms that he would give them favorable trade deals if they supported his claim to the throne. Meanwhile, David tried to fulfill his duties as crown prince. He worked on laws and policies that would help the common people. But his heart was not in it. He often stared out the castle windows and thought about Jessica. Lady Catherine grew frustrated with her distant husband. She had expected to be treated like a beloved queen, not ignored like an unwanted burden. She began spending time with other nobles who whispered about David's weakness and unfitness to rule. Neither David nor his father knew that their kingdom was about to face its greatest test. Marcus's war against Rivermede would force them to choose sides, and Carl's secret plotting would soon explode into open rebellion. The stage was set for a conflict that would change the fate of all 3 kingdoms. The battle for freedom. Marcus's army arrived at the valley where Rivermede stood like a dark storm cloud on the horizon. 3,000 soldiers in black armor marched in perfect formation. Their banners showed a red fist crushing a golden crown, Marcus's symbol of power. Elena watched from the walls of her village as the enemy made camp just outside arrow range. She had never seen so many soldiers in one place. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. How could her small force of defenders hope to defeat such numbers? Then she looked down at her own people preparing for battle. Farmers sharpened their swords, mothers checked their children's hiding places one last time, old men who had not fought in years put on rusty armor. Everyone was ready to die for their freedom. Elena's doubt vanished. These were not just soldiers following orders. They were people fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. That made them stronger than any army. Marcus rode forward under a flag of truce. He was a big man with scars on his face and cold blue eyes. He wore expensive armor decorated with gold and jewels taken from conquered villages. "I am Duke Marcus of Ironhold," he called out. "I have come to claim what belongs to me. Surrender now, and I will be merciful. Your people can live if they swear loyalty to me." Elena appeared on the wall above the main gate. She wore simple leather armor and carried her father's sword. She looked small compared to Marcus, but her voice carried clearly across the battlefield. "I am Queen Elena of Rivermede," she replied. "This valley belongs to my people. We have built everything here with our own hands. You have no claim to any of it." Marcus laughed harshly. "You are just a woman playing at being a ruler. Stand aside and let real men handle this. I have enough soldiers to crush your pathetic village like an insect." "Then why did you come here asking for surrender?" Elena shot back. "A man who is sure of victory does not need to make threats. He just attacks." The Duke's face turned red with anger. "You will regret those words. I will burn this place to the ground and sell your people as slaves. But first, I will make you watch." Elena did not flinch. "Come and try. We will be waiting." Marcus wheeled his horse around and rode back to his camp. Within an hour, the attack began. The first assault was a test of Rivermede's defenses. Marcus sent 500 men to charge the main gate while archers fired from behind. But Elena had prepared for this. Hidden pits full of spikes stopped the first wave of attackers. Burning oil poured from the walls scattered the rest. "They fight like cornered rats," Marcus told his generals after the failed attack. "We need to show them the futility of resistance." The next day brought a more serious assault. Marcus divided his army into 3 groups. One attacked the main gate again as a distraction. The other 2 tried to climb the walls on the east and west sides of the village. Elena ran from one crisis to another, leading her defenders wherever the fighting was thickest. She fought with a sword in each hand, cutting down enemies who made it over the walls. Her presence inspired the defenders to fight harder than they thought possible. The battle lasted all day. By evening, Marcus's forces had been driven back again. But the defenders had paid a heavy price. Nearly 100 of Elena's fighters were dead or wounded. They could not afford many more victories like this one. That night, Elena met with her surviving war council. Everyone was exhausted and covered in blood. Thomas, the guard captain, had a bandage around his head. Sarah, the archer, could barely lift her bow arm. "We cannot take another direct assault like that," Thomas said bluntly. "We are running out of fighters." "Marcus knows this too," Elena replied. "He will try to starve us out or find another way in. We need to change our strategy." Elena had been thinking about this problem all day. Defending the walls would only work for so long. She needed to take the fight to Marcus before he could organize a crushing attack. "We will attack his camp tonight," she announced. "Small groups hitting different targets at the same time, burn his supplies, kill his horses, create confusion and panic." Her advisors looked worried. "That is very dangerous," Sarah said. "If we lose too many fighters in the raid, we will not be able to defend the walls tomorrow." Elena nodded. "It is a risk. But doing nothing is also a risk. Marcus has more men than we do. Our only advantage is speed and surprise." The raid was planned for midnight, when most of Marcus's soldiers would be asleep. Elena divided her best fighters into 5 groups. Each group had a specific target in the enemy camp. They would strike fast and retreat before the enemy could organize a response. Elena led one group herself. Their job was to destroy the enemy's food supplies and siege weapons. She knew this was the most dangerous mission, which was why she refused to send anyone else. The raid began perfectly. Elena's fighters crept through the darkness like ghosts. They had lived in these mountains all their lives and could move silently even in complete darkness. The first explosions lit up the night sky as burning supply wagons sent sparks into the air. Frightened horses broke free from their tethers and ran through the camp, trampling soldiers who tried to catch them. Elena's group reached the siege weapons without being detected. These massive wooden machines were designed to break down city walls. If Marcus could not use them, his army would have much more trouble taking Rivermede. They worked quickly, pouring oil on the wooden frames and setting them on fire. The weapons burned like giant torches, creating lighter and confusion. But the success of the raid also made it harder to escape. The enemy camp was now fully awake and looking for attackers. Elena's group had to fight their way out through increasing numbers of angry soldiers. "This way," Elena shouted, leading her fighters toward a gap in the enemy lines. But more soldiers kept arriving to block their escape route. Thomas appeared beside Elena, swinging his sword at 2 enemies at once. "My lady, we need to leave now." Elena knew he was right. They had done enough damage for one night. It was time to retreat before they were all killed or captured. But as they ran toward the forest, disaster struck. An enemy archer hiding in the darkness shot an arrow at Elena. She did not see it coming in time to dodge. The arrow struck her in the shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the ground. Pain shot through her body like fire. She tried to get up, but felt dizzy and weak. "The queen is down," someone shouted. Elena's fighters formed a protective circle around her, fighting desperately to keep the enemy away. Thomas grabbed Elena under the arms and started dragging her toward safety. But more enemy soldiers were closing in from all sides. It looked like they would all be captured or killed. Then rescue came from an unexpected direction. Prince David and 50 knights from Westold came charging out of the forest. They had been riding hard for 2 days after receiving Eleanor's message asking for help. David had decided to answer the call despite his father's objections. King Robert wanted to stay neutral in the conflict between Marcus and Rivermede. But David could not stand by while innocent people were slaughtered. "For Rivermede," David shouted as his knights crashed into the enemy soldiers. The fresh fighters quickly scattered Marcus's men and cleared a path to safety. Elena was barely conscious as Thomas and David carried her back to the village. The arrow had not hit any vital organs, but she had lost a lot of blood. Marina worked through the night to save her daughter's life. The raid had been a success despite Elena's injury. Marcus's supplies and siege weapons were destroyed. His army was demoralized and angry, but he still had enough men to continue the siege. More importantly, Elena now had an unexpected ally. Prince David of Westold had chosen to support her fight for freedom. This would change the balance of power in ways that neither Elena nor David could yet imagine. Healing and truth. Elena woke up 3 days later in her own bed with bandages around her shoulder and chest. The pain was still terrible, but Marina's healing skills had saved her life. The arrow had been removed and the wound cleaned with special herbs. "You almost died," Marina told her daughter. "The arrow missed your heart by less than an inch. You were very lucky." Elena tried to sit up but fell back with a groan. "What happened to Marcus? Is he still out there?" "Prince David convinced him to accept a temporary truce," Marina explained. "Both armies are resting and treating their wounded." "But the war is not over." Elena was confused. "Prince David? Who is Prince David?" Marina smiled. "The young man who saved your life. He is the crown prince of Westold. He came with 50 knights to help us fight Marcus." This was surprising news. Elena knew that Westold usually stayed out of other kingdoms' wars. King Robert was famous for his cautious policies. "Why would a prince risk his life for us?" Elena asked. "What does he want in return?" "You should ask him yourself," Marina said. "He has been waiting to speak with you ever since you were wounded." Marina left and returned a few minutes later with Prince David. Elena had expected to see a soft nobleman who had never faced real danger. Instead, David looked like a warrior who had been fighting for years. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and serious brown eyes. His armor was scratched and dented from recent battles. There was a quiet strength about him that reminded Elena of her own father, who had died when she was young. "Your Majesty," David said with a bow, "I am glad to see you recovering." Elena studied his face carefully. She had learned to read people's intentions by watching their expressions. David seemed honest and straightforward, but she remained cautious. "Why did you help us?" she asked directly. "Westold has never interfered in other kingdoms' wars before." David sat down in a chair beside her bed. "Because what Marcus is doing is wrong. Strong rulers should protect weak people, not prey on them. You and your people deserve to live in peace." "And your father agreed to this?" Elena pressed. "King Robert just let you march off to war without permission." David looked uncomfortable. "My father does not know I am here. I came against his wishes. He believes in staying neutral no matter what happens to other kingdoms." Elena was impressed despite herself. Few nobles would risk their inheritance to help strangers. David had given up his comfortable life to fight for people he had never met. "That was very foolish of you," Elena said, "and very brave." They talked for over an hour. David told Elena about the political situation in Westold and the growing threats from neighboring kingdoms. Elena shared her dreams of making Rivermede a safe haven for refugees and outcasts. Elena found herself liking David more than she had expected. He was intelligent and thoughtful, not like the arrogant princes she had met before. He asked good questions about how Rivermede was governed and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. But there was also sadness in David's eyes that he tried to hide. Elena sensed that he had suffered some great loss or disappointment. She did not ask about it directly, but she made note of it. "What will you do when this war is over?" Elena asked. "Your father must be very angry with you by now." David shrugged. "I will face whatever consequences come, but I could not live with myself if I had stayed home while innocent people died." Marina had been listening from the doorway. After David left, she came back into Elena's room with a knowing smile. "He is a good man," the older woman said, "and he looks at you the way a man looks at a woman he could love." Elena felt her cheeks turn red. "Mother, do not be ridiculous. He is here to help with the war, nothing more." But Marina was not fooled. She had seen the way Elena's face changed when she talked to David. She had also noticed how David's eyes lingered on Elena when he thought no one was looking. "The moon goddess has shown me visions," Marina said quietly. "I have seen you standing beside a man who will be your equal in strength and wisdom. A man who will help you lead both your peoples to peace." Elena did not want to hear about prophecies and visions. She had more immediate problems to worry about. Marcus was still camped outside her village with thousands of soldiers. Even with David's help, the odds against them were still terrible. Over the next few days, Elena learned more about her unexpected ally. David spent his time talking to her fighters and learning about their tactics. He was clearly an experienced military leader who had studied warfare extensively. David also spent time with Marina, asking her about the history of Westold and Rivermede. He was particularly interested in the story of how Marina had been exiled years ago. "I remember hearing about a healer who was accused of poisoning the old king," David told Marina. "That was you, was it not?" Marina nodded sadly. "I tried to save King Henry's life, but Duke William wanted him dead. William poisoned the king and blamed me for it. No one believed my innocence." David's face grew dark with anger. "Duke William was my grandfather. He died when I was young, but I heard stories about his cruelty. If what you say is true, then my family owes you a great debt." "The past is the past," Marina replied, "but the future can be different if good people choose to make it so." David seemed to take this as a personal challenge. He began working even harder to help defend Rivermede. He shared his military knowledge with Elena's fighters and helped plan better strategies. Elena watched David with growing respect and admiration. He never acted like he was better than her people because of his royal birth. He ate the same food as everyone else and took his share of guard duty on the walls. But Elena also noticed that David never talked about his personal life. He never mentioned family or friends back in Westhold. There was a loneliness about him that suggested he had lost something important. One evening, Elena felt strong enough to walk around the village and check on the defenses. David accompanied her, pointing out weak spots that could be improved. They climbed to the highest tower to get a better view of Marcus's camp. The enemy fires twinkled in the distance like fallen stars. It was strangely peaceful despite the danger. "Why did you really come here?" Elena asked suddenly. "And do not tell me it was just about helping innocent people. There is something else." David was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was full of pain. "I lost someone I loved," he said simply. "Someone died because of my family's politics and my own foolishness. I came here because I needed to do something good for once, something that might make up for my failures." Elena felt a stab of sympathy. She had seen that look of grief before in other people who had lost loved ones. "What happened?" David told her about Jessica and the terrible accident that had led to her death. He spoke about his guilt and his loveless marriage to Lady Catherine. He explained how his brother Carl had vanished with the army and might be plotting against their father. "I should have protected Jessica better," David finished. "I should have been stronger and braver. Instead, I let politics and fear guide my choices." Elena was quiet while she absorbed this story. She understood now why David had seemed so sad and why he had been willing to risk everything to help strangers. Guilt can destroy you if you let it, Elena said gently. I know because I have felt it too. When my mother and I were exiled, I blamed myself for years. I thought there must have been something I could have done differently. How did you overcome it? David asked. By building something good, Elena replied. By helping other people who were suffering the way I had suffered. The guilt never completely goes away, but it becomes bearable when you use it to make the world better. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Elena felt a connection to David that surprised her. They were both leaders who carried heavy burdens. They both understood the loneliness of making difficult decisions that affected other people's lives. Marcus will attack again soon, Elena said eventually. His soldiers are getting restless. He cannot afford to sit here much longer. David nodded. Tomorrow or the next day at the latest. Are your people ready? Elena looked down at her village. Lamplight glowed in the windows of homes where families were sharing their evening meals. Children played in the streets under the watchful eyes of their parents. Old people sat on porches telling stories to anyone who would listen. They are ready, she said. This is their home. They will fight for it no matter what the cost. But Elena knew the next battle might be their last. Marcus had more soldiers, better weapons, and unlimited supplies. Even with David's help, Rivermede's defenders were outnumbered almost 4-1. Elena began to think about desperate measures. If they could not win a direct battle, maybe they could find another way to defeat Marcus. She had an idea that might work, but it would require tremendous courage and sacrifice. That night, Elena called her war council together one more time. She had a plan that might save Rivermede, but she needed everyone's agreement to make it work. The plan was dangerous and might result in all their deaths. But it was also their best chance for victory against overwhelming odds. The final battle. Marcus launched his final assault at dawn on the 7th day of the siege. This time he committed his entire army to breaking through Rivermede's defenses. There would be no retreat and no mercy. Elena watched from the walls as 3,000 enemy soldiers formed up in perfect battle lines. They carried tall ladders for scaling the walls and massive hammers for breaking down the gates. Archers in the back ranks prepared to rain arrows down on the defenders. Elena's own force had been reduced to fewer than 600 fighters. Many were wounded from previous battles. They were tired, hungry, and running low on arrows and other supplies. But Elena had spent the night preparing a surprise that Marcus would never expect. Her plan was desperate and dangerous, but it might be their only chance for survival. Remember, Elena told her fighters, we only need to hold out for 1 hour. After that, everything changes. The battle began with a storm of arrows from both sides. Marcus's archers had better equipment and more ammunition, but Elena's fighters knew every stone and corner of their village. They used the buildings and walls for cover while picking off enemy soldiers with carefully aimed shots. Then came the main assault. Enemy soldiers charged forward carrying their ladders and siege hammers. They moved in tight formation, protecting each other with overlapping shields. Elena's defenders poured burning oil and dropped heavy stones from the walls. They fought with the desperation of people who had nowhere to retreat. Every man, woman, and child in Rivermede knew that defeat meant death or slavery. The fighting was brutal and chaotic. Enemy soldiers climbed over the walls in several places, forcing Elena's fighters to battle hand to hand in the streets. Buildings caught fire from burning arrows. The air filled with smoke and the screams of wounded men. Elena fought at the main gate where the heaviest fighting was taking place. Her shoulder wound had not fully healed, but she ignored the pain and swung her sword with deadly precision. David fought beside her, his knights forming a protective circle around the gate. The east wall is falling, Thomas shouted over the noise of battle. They have too many men on the walls. Elena could see that her plan was working exactly as she had hoped. Marcus was throwing everything he had at the village walls, leaving his camp lightly defended. All his attention was focused on the immediate battle. Hold fast, Elena called to her fighters. Just a little longer. But holding fast was becoming impossible. More enemy soldiers poured over the walls every minute. Elena's defenders were being pushed back street by street toward the center of the village. Marcus himself appeared at the broken east wall, leading a charge of his best soldiers. He cut down two of Elena's fighters with his heavy sword and advanced toward the village square. "Surrender now," Marcus bellowed. "Your resistance is finished." Elena met him in single combat while the battle raged around them. Marcus was bigger and stronger, but Elena was faster and more skilled. Their swords rang against each other like church bells as they fought back and forth across the square. "You fight well for a woman," Marcus taunted between sword strokes, "but you cannot win. I have too many men." Elena did not waste breath on words. She focused all her energy on staying alive until her plan could be completed. She just needed a few more minutes. Then she heard the sound she had been waiting for. Horn calls echoed from the mountains around the valley. The ground began to shake with the thunder of approaching horses. Marcus paused in his attack, looking around with confusion. "What is that noise?" Elena smiled grimly. "That is the sound of your defeat." 500 fresh warriors came charging down from the mountain passes. They were fighters from allied villages who had been hiding in the caves since before the siege began. Elena had sent them secret messages during the night, telling them when to attack, but these reinforcements were not the real surprise. Behind them came 2,000 soldiers wearing the blue and gold banners of Westold. King Robert had finally decided to enter the war. David had sent messengers to his father every day, reporting on the siege and asking for help. At first, King Robert had refused to get involved. But when he learned that his son might die defending Rivermede, the old king changed his mind. "I may not approve of David's choices," King Robert had told his generals, "but he is still my son and heir. I will not let him die in a foreign land." The arrival of so many fresh troops turned the battle completely around. Marcus's soldiers, who had been on the verge of victory, suddenly found themselves surrounded and outnumbered. "Retreat," Marcus shouted to his men. "Back to the camp." But it was too late for an orderly withdrawal. Marcus's army had spread out too much during the assault on the village. Now they were caught in small groups and cut off from each other. The battle became a rout. Marcus's soldiers threw down their weapons and surrendered rather than face certain death. Only Marcus himself and a few hundred of his most loyal followers managed to fight their way out of the valley. "This is not over," Marcus screamed at Elena as he fled. "I will return with a bigger army." "You have not seen the last of me." Elena was too tired to chase after him. She sat down heavily on the steps of the village hall and watched the enemy disappear into the forest. Her gamble had worked, but the cost had been terrible. Elena cried. Over many souls of her people had died in this battle. Finally, with the help of Prince David and his soldiers, Elena won the battle, but King Marcus vowed to come back, but never return back again to Rivermede. As Marcus besieges Rivermede, Elena employs guerrilla tactics and defensive strategies to hold off the much larger force. During a nighttime raid on Marcus's camp, Elena is wounded, but Prince David of Westold arrives unexpectedly with reinforcements, defying his father's orders to remain neutral. David is haunted by guilt over the death of someone he loved, but finds purpose in defending the innocent. Elena and David develop a deep connection based on their shared understanding of leadership's burdens and their commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Despite Elena's initial focus on survival, she finds herself drawn to David's integrity and courage. Through clever strategy, Elena coordinates a final battle where hidden allies emerge from the mountains while King Robert of Westold arrives with reinforcements. Marcus's forces are routed, though the King Duke escapes, vowing revenge. 2 years later, Elena and David marry, uniting their kingdoms in an alliance. Meanwhile, David must deal with his brother Karl's attempted coup in Westhold. After defeating Karl and restoring order, Elena and David establish a federation of communities built on principles of justice and sanctuary. Queen Elena and King David ruled jointly for 40 years, creating the most prosperous and just alliance in the known world. Rivermede grew from a village of outcasts to the capital of a federation of free communities. Duke Marcus was never seen again, though travelers sometimes spoke of a bitter old man in distant lands, warning anyone who would listen about the dangers of letting women rule kingdoms. Finally, Prince David found peace and happiness in his life again, after losing his first love and his father forced him into another woman that was not his choice. Queen Elena and King David ruled jointly, and Rivermede grew in peace, love, and fruitfulness. The end of the story. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Make sure you drop your comment and share your thoughts with us.